It's certainly sending a mixed message, and as you pointed out, exports to the United States are surprisingly strong and have been for a number of months. Against that, though, exports to Europe are really collapsing, and that's no surprise given the crisis we're seeing in the Eurozone area. But still, 8% is not all that high, and we're used to figures of around 30% for the last 5 years or so. So it doesn't provide much support to China's economy. Nonetheless, insofar the market was looking for a decline in those figures, better than expected.
As you know, Chinese authorities are trying to engineer a slowdown, and we saw the inflation numbers pick up this week. Is there really a slowdown taking place? Is this 7.5% to 8% growth still being sustained in China?
Certainly, I would be very surprised to see growth slow below 8% by most countries' standards, even emerging market countries. That's a very robust rate of growth. Nonetheless, it is a little bit slower than the 10% we've become used to over the last few years. So certainly, the government's efforts to engineer a slowdown are starting to gain some traction. And in fact, 8% growth is a far healthier number insofar that it shouldn't produce significant inflation pressures. That said, this week's inflation numbers were a little bit higher than had been expected.
As you know, the future of China's growth is very dependent on the growth of its middle class. And you've done analysis on this, looking at a middle class with some numbers as low as 237 million, as high as 412 million if you use a benchmark of $3,700 of annual income. What is the realistic number for the middle class right now? How robust is it in China?
I'd suggest the middle class that we'd like to focus on is around about the 160 million person mark. This is the middle class that is most likely able to own a car and own a house. Certainly, there is a larger number of people who can make discretionary purchases, whether that's of beauty products or take a holiday to the neighboring province. But this middle class, they're most exposed to rising inflation, and they can fall as much as they can rise. So I think it's very important to focus on the core middle class. These are the households that are earning above $7,500 a year per person. These are the middle class that are more resilient to rising inflation.
You also suggest you can destroy a middle class, that we should keep this in mind with the failures of emerging economies. How's China managing its middle class now, though?
It's actually a major concern for China, and for all the talk about a rising middle class, it isn't a straight line trajectory. And one of the concerns over the past few years has been that rising prices, particularly home prices, has effectively destroyed parts of the middle class as they are no longer able to buy their home or other discretionary purchases. So the real challenge for the authorities at this point is to keep inflation under the control, or at least below the level of wage increases, to ensure that your average household feels that every year they're taking away a little bit more real purchasing power. That's the major challenge for the incoming leadership.
At the recent party Congress, they said that the danger in terms of management right now is that the income gap has never been wider between the upper class and the lower class in China. Are they moving swift enough to manage this?
They are moving swiftly, and they have been for at least a decade now. The problem is that the challenge is so great that they haven't been able to narrow that income gap in a manner in which they would like, and the result of that is growing social unhappiness. So it will be a major concern for the incoming leadership, and it's also a warning for many other emerging markets, including those in the Middle East, that in spite of all of China's resources and attention to this problem, it still has challenges, and clearly those challenges are great, or if not greater, in many emerging markets, especially the Middle East.